I teach digital marketing apprenticeships at the Growth Company. Before that, I was in industry and I was a digital marketing manager for a few big brands. And prior to that, I started my own business from a very frugal marketing budget and a Twitter profile. So that is the reason Kirsty has asked me to pop on tonight and just have a chit chat with you guys about what a personal brand is and how we develop our sort of digital footprint in a really positive way. So that's what we'll be doing. I'll hand over to Danny and you can introduce yourself a little bit more.
Thanks a lot, Fran. Hi, everybody. My name's Danny and I currently work for a company called Buffer. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of them, but we are actually a social media scheduling platform. So I'm going to be kind of taking on a little bit of information today about social media scheduling and how it can help in terms of presenting your personal brand and getting your kind of work and your images out there to the world and how you can build it to network. Because I do work for Buffer, I'm going to put a disclaimer out. A lot of the information we're talking about is related to our tool, but there is so many other tools out there that you can use. It's definitely not a sales pitch, but what I'll be showing you is mostly from our product, just to keep that in mind as I go through it. But yeah, happy to answer any questions and hope we can have a lot of fun today.
I click, it just takes a few extra seconds of panic for me to get what I want to achieve done. So yeah, I just want to introduce myself. My name's Kirsty. I work over at Manchester Codes. Most of you are familiar with the coding school. So yeah, we're the only part-time, well, we were up until recently, only part-time coding school in Manchester. That's where we're headquartered. And yeah, it's so lovely to have you all on here. But if you want to talk more about the coding side, hit me up after this. But yeah, Fran, should we get stuck in? We're just about 5 past now.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, cool. Let's do it. So I suppose where we start is, what is a personal brand? I find teaching digital marketing, as it is a ever-evolving industry, we are bombarded with absolute jargon and it all just becomes a bit wishy-washy and very marketing lingo, and often the messaging and the point of it gets lost in the abyss. However, in 2020, it's really straightforward to say that your personal branding is your online presence. It's how you project and create this sort of digital persona of who you are, or at least who we think you are. And I suppose back in the day, your personal branding would have been word of mouth. And it's very much the same online these days, but back in the day, it would be the bank manager would lend you some money because he trusted who you were based on word of mouth, that you were of good character. And that's lovely. You know, when you were applying for jobs, you were competing with John down the road who had a very similar skill set to you and was also a nice guy. And the butcher had given you a recommendation and that was lovely. But now you guys are all fighting it out in an industry that is completely digital, and it's really difficult to cut through the noise and make yourself heard. So what makes you special ultimately? We've all got beautiful CVs, we've all got work experience and job histories, and we've got degrees, public school, private school. You know, some of you have done work experience with big business, some of you have got no work experience, but honestly, what's the difference? What does it matter? So how do you stand out? So for me, my CV, as I said in my little bio that Kirsty put on this event, I'm so proud of my personal branding and I stand by it to such a degree, my authentic online image, because it's true to self, that I have my social media handles embedded in my CV. Because I would find 9 times out of 10, especially these days, because of the competition, employers will very happily go to one place and one place only. And it is one click that will put you at the top of the pile or the bottom of the pile. And of course, that is Google. How many people, just by a raise of hands, we won't unmute, have Googled themselves? Okay, good. Yes. And did we like what we saw, or did we have a slight panic and then Google, how do we scrub information from the big wide web? Yes, quite. Listen, when I Googled myself a few years ago, we had MySpace profile pictures that would honestly make you cringe forever. The emo haircuts, the piercings, the Avril Lavigne, it was a bit much. Did I want a future employer to see it? No, I did not. If you Google me and my employer, current employer did, and bearing in mind I work in education, that is a big deal. I take up the first 3 pages of Google. That is not through brilliant SEO. That is just through incredible personal branding. So on page 1 of Google, you'll find all of my social media, Twitter first, LinkedIn second, and that's exactly how I would want it to be, because those are the 2 platforms that I use to promote myself. And then it's a bunch of articles. So the most important thing for me to say here is I created my personal brand entirely through Twitter. And I suppose I did it differently to most people. There's do's and don'ts of building a personal branding sort of persona. And one of the major don'ts is don't overshare. Don't give too much insight into who you are. Don't air your dirty laundry online. However, that was my niche. So I am a very brilliantly qualified digital marketer. I have a degree in politics, and on paper, it's lovely. I also have a criminal record. I have been to rehab for drug addiction, and those things kind of balance each other out. I have 2 pieces of paper who say who I am, neither of which I don't know if you would hire me off the basis of. So with my Twitter, I decided to just put it all out there. And my Twitter now, in my bio, says, once upon a time, ex-offender, now award-winning social entrepreneur. That couldn't summarize me any better. And I think that is the key to personal branding. If you guys could summarize who you are and what you're about in one snapshot phrase, that is all you need to do. And you need to stick with it. You need to believe it. So the 3 key things to good personal branding is sharing your values, your goals, and I've completely forgot what the third one is, guys. How embarrassing is that? Just bear with me. Your story. Oh, I'm waffling here, of course. Yes, your values, your story, and your goals. So as I say, the big don't of personal branding is that we don't go too deep. We're not going to get on our political bandstand. We're not going to wave our flags. We're not going to get carried away. But it is so important that you build an authentic online persona. People want to buy into who you are. You are not just a CV. You're not just a good coder. You're not just a piece of paper. What are you about? So creating an online, beautiful, authentic you is the most important thing in the world. Now, back in the day, and pre-COVID, most definitely, networking events were the go-to. In order to build this authentic persona, we felt like we had to do it face-to-face, and very much so. Business cards were the go-to, and you would schmooze, and you would handshake, and you would drink free coffee and eat free bacon sandwiches, and it was all lovely. You can do it online, and you should do it online, because ultimately, that is the only way that you're going to make yourself known to these people. So, my mother is a big, scary lawyer. And she probably gets thousands of applications to be a trainee solicitor. And the first thing she will do is she will Google the person in mind. She'll have a little poke around in their social media, which is utterly terrifying if you hadn't had a good, deep digital cleanse. And then if they get past that first hurdle and they go for an interview, she will ask them a really strange off-the-wall question. And her favorite one is, she'll have someone come in, they've got a first in law and they're a cog in a machine. They are one of 100 who have turned up in a grey suit, polyester, lovely. They know it inside out. And she will say to them, if you could have come as a cartoon character today, who would you have come as? And all of them flinch and freak out, and nobody actually knows what to say, because they are so ingrained and so trained that we go through this protocol that they haven't actually had time to think about who they are, what they're about, and weren't expecting a question about them. They wanted to know and share all about their capabilities, all about their, bits and pieces, but they couldn't actually answer a simple question about personality and who they are and what they're about. I always found that really interesting growing up, and I always expect when I go for an interview these days for someone to ask me a curveball, but ultimately, because I've already put myself out there, I am an open book policy, massively so. So, as I've said, we've got 3 cores: values, goals, and your story. I'm not saying air your dirty laundry, but just a little insight. What's your ambition? Where do you want to be? Who are you going to build your network? Who is it? Who are your people? The most important thing about a personal brand and building it online in a digital world is finding your people. It's building a network of like minds, but also being kind. It's so important. We live in a world that is so dog eat dog. And yes, of course, we're bombarded with competition, but it doesn't have to always be seen like that. I think the critical things always is to be consistent, be creative, but be kind. When you're busy building your network and you're busy building yourself up, pull others up. engagement in a social world online is everything. That doesn't just mean a like, that means really, really engaging, paying attention. If you have set out your values, your purpose, your goals, your story, you have to buy into it. You have to build authenticity and trust, because there's nothing worse than a transparent digital persona. Okay. I'm thinking about who my favorites are actually, and I came up with a really adorable marketing tagline, and I'm going to make you all cringe, but in a world of Donald Trumps, shall we all try and be a bit more Michelle Obama? Because I could think of nothing worse if that's all we're left with. If we think about personal branding, that is a woman who does it. Absolutely. Agenda, personality, and it is beautifully transparent. I suppose that depends on your opinion, but I genuinely believe that. So when I teach my digital marketers, I say there's 3 C's that make a really good marketer, which is creative, consistent content. That is exactly true whether you are marketing for business or whether you are marketing yourself. Those 3 C's are critical to good digital presence. Creative, consistent content, always. So I decided to just expand those for this session, which is clear, consistent content cultivates credibility. And if you don't enjoy alliteration, that will have made you all want to die a little inside, but I enjoyed that greatly. So, as my mother also said, you can be a jack of all trades, but a master of none. You guys are all in it for the coding. It is the biggest industry at the moment. It is going to get bigger and better. Now is the time to really start building and putting out who you are, how good you are, and why you're better than everybody else in the nicest way possible. Okay, and on that note, Danny can tell you all about how to be consistent, because the easiest way to do it without impinging upon your social life, your working life, your furlough, is to use some seriously good scheduling software. So I feel that's the perfect time to hand over.
Thanks a lot for that, Fran. That was really interesting. And I always love the transparency that you shared with us all as well there. It was really, really enlightening. Thank you. So on to some scheduling stuff. So I don't know what your knowledge is or background is of any social media scheduling tools, but there's like dozens out there available to you. So there's some big ones like Hootsuite, Agorapulse, Buffer, and then there's some smaller ones like Sprout Social and so on. And they all have kind of very similar features, similar pricing, and they're all available. A lot of them have free plans as well, which is probably most applicable to everyone here. And I think they're really good tools to be able to help you get yourself across on social media. So typically you'll be able to connect all your different social media accounts to one tool and plug it in there. And then from there, you'll have a dashboard that'll allow you to create different updates for typically LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and then maybe some others like Pinterest. Hootsuite has a ton of different connections, so like YouTube as well, they can collaborate with them. So those are kind of really interesting. So maybe if we're kind of going through a coding perspective and you're trying to build yourself up, connecting with something like Hootsuite where you can send posts to YouTube as well, and you can send your videos of work you've been working on, is going to be quite helpful and quite useful. But as I kind of mentioned earlier today, I'm probably going to focus on Buffer, and I'm going to just share my screen if that's okay with you, because I'm going to go and dive into the platform so you can have a see what it looks like. And then from there, I can tell you kind of how to use a tool like Buffer, how to get the most out of it, how to look into analytics to see what posts might be working, what isn't working. And then I'm also going to dive into some maybe do's and don'ts of social media scheduling, and also the differences between the different networks that you want to be sending to. Please, if anyone does have any questions, just ping them in the chat or just interrupt me at any point if you want. That's absolutely fine. But for now, I'm just going to dive into the Buffer dashboard and get started. So if we can get either a shout out or a thumbs up that everyone can see the screen, that'd be great. Thumbs up, perfect. So this would be a typical dashboard for a social media scheduling tool. Each of them will look somewhat different, but this is kind of what you basically think will look like. So here is the main Buffer dashboard, and in it you can see we're in the main Buffer account, and we have Instagram connected, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and then another Twitter account. So very, very basically here, you can just click into this main composer box, and this will allow you to select which social accounts you want to schedule your post for, and also allow you to customize for each network, which is something I think is really important that I'll come back to a little bit later on. But on a very kind of low basic level, this is really powerful for you. It saves you a hell of a lot of time. It saves you faffing about with different passwords and different logins and having to be opening 100 tabs at once, basically to try and get your message across on social media. We can also basically I'll deselect some of these stuff and just show you what it's like to schedule a post. So for Instagram, you always have to upload an image or a video. It's all a media friendly thing there. I'm going to go for a vanity shot here and go for my stock photo popping up. And it'll allow you just very easily to add a caption. And then we have a few options as well for engagement. So here you'll see an option for adding a first comment. And this is typically where people will add hashtags. Instagram is a really, really fantastic way of generating kind of engagement through hashtags, but a lot of people don't always necessarily want to have them within the caption of the post. So from there, if you add it into the first comment, it'll still generate the engagement from other people to be able to see your post and maybe just make your post look a little prettier. So from after that, you can basically add it to your queue, which will have a set kind of posting times available, or you can create a custom schedule post as well. And you can dive into different days or different times of what you're going for there. So in terms of maybe your journey as becoming coders or trying to build a personal brand, using a scheduler like this, I think can be really important, because if you're working on a project, you can set in advance what you want to add in, way ahead of where you're going. So let's say for me tomorrow, I'm starting on a cohort of Manchester codes. So in my personal Buffer account, I can schedule tweets like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm so nervous. I'm setting off on this journey. Can't wait to see what I'm going to learn. Or then on the next one, I'm breaking it. This is so hard, or something like that. And as Fran was saying, just be authentic with what you're doing, but you can literally share your feelings way ahead in advance. And I think it's really, really powerful. But there's so many more tools that we can dive into here as opposed to just the scheduling feature. So one big thing to kind of see what's working and see what is getting engagement is to check your analytics. So most platforms will have kind of basic analytics included. So that'll be just looking at your post that you sent out, and you'll see how many comments, how many likes that you've got available. This would probably be what most people will have the need to look at if we're doing it on a very personal level. But if you ever kind of get a job working with brands, or you go a bit larger, you can dive into analytics on a much greater scale. So I'm just going to flip over to this tab here just to kind of show you what that is going to be about. And this is where I think a lot of scheduling tools can be extremely powerful for you. So it allows you to kind of customize reports and kind of look at all your posts over a period of time. So I'm just going to dive into Instagram for an example here. So this is the month of September, and then you can see how many posts we've got. I'm just going to go a little bit further back and do last month instead. And you can kind of see the average performance, how your followers may have grown, and the posts that you've gone over. If you're sending stories out, you can go through the stories. But then a lot of things actually is really helpful in terms of knowing when to post on social media to get the most insight. So we also have a section here which other schedulers will as well in terms of answers. And this will typically tell you maybe what is the best type of post to send. So for instance, for Instagram, image is obviously going to be vital, but it's going to compare how that works next to a video post. For us, we get more engagement on an image post than we do on video, so that's good to know. Our average best time to post is about midday or 1 p.m. on a Monday. And then we don't want to be overpopulating our feed with too many posts as well. If we do more than one post per day, we probably lose a bit of engagement. So having these kind of insights will be really, really powerful for you in terms of how you grow your personal brand over a period of time as well. So you can see on the different days, the best times to post here. And you can also see your audience as well in a separate tab. But these are just kind of really good things to go into, and it allows you to get better insights of what is working with your social media as well. And then, yeah, like I mentioned a second ago, here we can see what our typical audience overview is, and it just gives you a nice little breakdown of the people who you are targeting, who are paying attention to your social media posts, and from there you can probably get some insights and kind of tweak your post to fit who you're trying to see as well. So that's pretty cool for me. One thing I spoke with Kirsty about is maybe some little do's and don'ts on what to do with a social media scheduling. And she was very, very gracious in the fact that she allowed me to critique the Manchester Codes social accounts as well. So I was kind of looking over those last weekend, and I noticed a couple of things that I would maybe do a little bit differently compared on what we
Danny,
would.
I'm worried about this because I'm awful at this. So this is painful to have to go through. But
Please don't be worried. It is very minute things which I don't think anyone would pick up on. But when I came like looking at them, I was like, "Ooh, oh, that could be maybe improved, and maybe like more engagement could be got there." So I'm really sorry for like, putting you on the spot. And
that's okay. I welcome constructive criticism. This is perfect.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
So as I kind of mentioned before, there are a lot of differences between the different social networks. So when you're kind of building your brand, for instance, obviously Twitter is like a short network. So, I mean, the character count used to be only 140, now it's 280, but typically the updates that you want to send to Twitter are going to be short, snappy, maybe even funny as well, with a few hashtags to try and garner engagement. It's also something where you'd go quite back and forth fast on compared to other social networks. So that's kind of something to bear in mind if you are sharing updates about projects that you're working on, or just live news, or just trying to be funny. It's a great place to start conversations. Compare that to something like Pinterest, which is going to be completely 1000% different, where you're just sharing very, very pretty visuals, or maybe like recipes and things like that. It's a completely different world. In terms of like trying to sell stories or tell stories, LinkedIn is a great way to do it in terms of a visual way of writing text compared to putting stories out there on Instagram. It's all different on the different networks. One big thing about Instagram that not everyone is always aware of is when you're trying to share your stories, people often put links in their captions. On Instagram, it doesn't actually allow you in any form to click on a link. So if you have a caption where you're trying to get people to sign up for a workshop on personal branding and you have the link included in it, people aren't going to be able to click on this. That's going to lead nowhere. So, I mean, obviously, if you're doing it on a web desktop, you can just copy the link into your URL bar and that will work fine. If you're on a mobile, which most people are on Instagram, it's going to be a little bit harder to try and catch that link. So one really great way to kind of get around that is most people in their captions would put, oh, follow the link in my bio. And here we can see on the Manchester Coast bio, we have a great option, which is really fantastic, which is a link tree. And this is basically a link to a landing page, which allows you to add multiple links of things that you want your users to navigate towards. And this is like, honestly, so helpful and like a really great option to use, because it means you don't have to necessarily update your bio every post if you're trying to send out a different link to it. So just as an example, clicking on this here will give you Manchester codes, I think, like link to signing up, some blog posts, and yeah, various different options on like promotion. And like, that's fantastic and it's incredible. So if you're posting to Instagram, try not to put any links in your caption of the post, navigate people to the bio and use a tool like Linktree to try and add more stuff there. If you wanted to ever use something like that through Buffer, we do have an option which is called the shop grid. And that's a little bit different than Linktree because it will also include basically all of your pictures on Instagram as well. So you have a few different links that you build in there, but on each different image that you upload to Instagram, you can have a unique link put in there. And then whenever anyone visits your shop grid page, all they'd have to do is click on the image and it'll take you to whichever link you want to put in. So that gives you maybe a few more options than just having kind of like 5 or 6 different links there. So those are kind of pretty good little things to remember. One other thing that I was going to critique on the Manchester Coast social media is the Twitter account. And this one is just me being a bit finicky, to be honest. But one of the most powerful things of a scheduling tool is that you can set the time to be like spread out, and it allows you to kind of get your message through at different stages of the day. So say if your audience is coming on at different times, it's maybe not necessarily the case for Manchester, it's going to be very local here in a time zone, but if you're kind of sending your post out all in one go, the algorithms that the social networks work with are not going to give it like great coverage. So if we look here, just over the last week, we have a promo tweet here for today's workshop. And this is, the copy on it's fantastic, it's great. And you have the Twitter card included for the link preview. But if we click into the tweet, we can see that we used the scheduler, we used Hootsuite, and it was scheduled for 12:25 on, was it Friday the 11th of September? But then if we just go to the next tweet in this queue, this one is pumping the same workshop, and this one time it's got a really funky promo video, which is like very captivating and it's great to look at. Again, fantastic content that'll catch your eye. But if we click into it, we'll see it was scheduled through Hootsuite at 12:25. So these two different tweets went out at the exact same time. And that's just going to limit the impact of, you know, the message that you're trying to send out. So using the scheduler is very, very handy. But if you maybe don't spread out your tweets like an hour a day, a couple of hours apart, something like that, it's going to minimize the impact that you can have. So I just love to kind of give a little heads up to kind of that as well. Yeah, and just be aware of what content you're putting out on different networks as well. So as I kind of very quickly showed you earlier, in a composer box, when you're creating your messages, typically you'll try and send them to different social networks at the same time, but that doesn't necessarily mean put the same content in each one. So whilst you can have the same bulk of a message, it's great to maybe customize each post for the different networks. So with Instagram, you'll upload an image, you'll have a nice quick caption of, you know, the main points that you're trying to get across, and maybe add, please click the link in the bio. With Facebook, you can customize it, so you'll add a slightly different message. You can add a link preview, but maybe with Facebook, because you have the option of kind of like writing longer text that is a bit more captivating, you can share a little bit more. Same with LinkedIn. With Twitter, you would customize it so the post itself is within the character limit, and then yeah, from there you can just shorten the message, and that way it's a bit more authentic and it doesn't feel like your message is just copy and paste across every social network. And also you don't have to send them all at the exact same time across the different social networks too. If you stagger it across the different networks, they're going to reach different audiences at different times, and that'll kind of increase and maximize the engagement you'll get from your different kind of followers and friends across the social networks as well. So I think hopefully those little tips can be fairly helpful. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the critique, Kirsty, that's the only things I'm going to say. There's the only thing I picked up on. So hopefully that wasn't too painful for you.
Yeah, well, the thing about, so the first point that you made about Linktree, I love using Linktree. I think it's really good. I guess the only thing to be mindful is to constantly update it. So making sure that the links are working and that whatever you're promoting is probably at the top of Linktree. So I have to forget that. So thank you for the heads up. And putting link in the bio.
I know, it's such a little buzz phrase, isn't it? But it's handy to kind of remember it. And I mean, there's a few different ways as well. Instagram is a really funny network compared to the others. So like stories on Instagram is so powerful. So like obviously trying to put as much information as and visualizing like captivating content in your stories is going to be really powerful. And if you're lucky enough to have a huge following on Instagram, if you have over 10,000 followers, what you are allowed to do is put the link in your stories. So you'll see some accounts where they say, oh, swipe up to find out more. And basically that feature becomes unlocked once you hit past, I think it's 10,000 followers. So that might be a bit hard to achieve in terms of trying to create a personal brand. But if you have that following, then you can put those in your stories as well. And I did read something a week ago or so where Instagram will be looking to test out paid, basically clickable links in the captions in the coming years. So that might be something that will change going forward. But for now, yeah, it's not available. So I think it's just quite powerful to remember that when you are kind of using your scheduling tools. Cool. I think like in the basics, that was most things I wanted to share. And like, just remember that different social networks are going to be different, so you're not going to necessarily be saying the exact same content across them. Use the scheduling tools that you have available and make sure that you kind of tapping into all the features that they have. Like scheduling itself is rather basic, you know, there's not much to it. You set a time and a day and you choose which network you want to send to. But I think a lot of the power from these type of tools is from the analytics side of things that you can get. And yeah, really kind of looking into the statistics across the different social networks to find out what social content works for you. who is engaging in your content, and basically how you can leverage that to push your brand as well. And yeah, hopefully that's pretty simple, and happy to answer any questions that may or may not come up. And sorry if any of that felt like a sales pitch for Buffer. There are lots of other tools, and please go and explore them, because some of them will for sure have better free plans or cheaper kind of pro plans and stuff. So yeah, hopefully there'll be a few good options for you all there.
More about kind of how you built your following. How did you get started? Were you focused on, was it a newsletter you were driving people to? Like, what was the end goal? I think that'd be quite interesting to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually this has a lot of relevance to what Danny was saying, in that I think when you're trying to cultivate an online brand, and for me at the time, it was, well, the brand of the business was always positives over negatives, and that was the ethos always, and it remains true to this day. So the business was called The Barker Baker, and I set it up on Twitter just as my first dip into social media. I realized that that is where I was going to get the most instantaneous connections, engagements, and start building networks of relevant people. So my hashtags, I did some research because I'm a geek, and I think that's really important when we're talking about personal branding, is that do your research. Things like Sprout Social have got really good reports quarterly where they'll tell you peak times on different channels for different types of content and things like that. So just a little peruse on there can really game change your engagement. So you're not posting and nobody's watching. And it's fascinating, honestly, to see who's watching and when. I'm sure we're all guilty of analysing our Insta story views and things like that. It's become human nature. We have to know who, how, where, when, why. But for me, it began on Twitter. And it began with the local Manchester markets following me, and then the local press, which is the Manchester Evening News. We all know it. It's synonymous with anyone who is a Mancunian or elsewhere. And just again, when it was 141 characters on Twitter, the ability to be able to summarize who I was and what I was about, which was an ex-offender trying to get back into the job market, scared of disclosing that I had a criminal conviction despite having a brilliant CV. I was terrified, and I decided to take that fear and turn it into something really positive, which was to wave it in the face of everybody. On Twitter, is there any scarier place to be so bold? I'm not quite sure, especially when it comes to something like a criminal conviction, because we know that Twitter is a scary place at the best of times. But I did, and the first time I put a tweet out about being an ex-offender who had found sort of a therapeutic notion through making bread, who knew? How odd is that to say out loud? And the first person to respond to me was one of my favourite chefs who I'd been following on Twitter and engaging with on Twitter, and that's exactly the point. You get what you give, most definitely, so bear that in mind for your personal branding. Don't expect anything for free unless you're willing to share and care. Was Raymond Blanc, and I adore him. He's beautiful, he's French, he's the epitome of everything that is just delightfully European. And he responded to me in the early days and said, that is the most beautiful 141 characters I've ever read. And it changed my life and inspired me to sort of turn it up a notch and just be a bit braver and start talking to more people and telling more people what I was doing and what I was about. And I was bold, I was brazen, I was a bit cheeky. I pushed the boundaries because at the time, and still I think in 2020, there is some sort of taboo about being a bit of a criminal, and a criminal with a posh accent. You can't hear this on Twitter. So nobody knew who I was. I was just kind of the ex-con who made bread and sold it at Manchester markets. It was lovely, and that very much developed into, and this happens still, I can be walking down the street in Manchester and people who follow me on Twitter will go, "Ooh, are you the girl who sells chocolate soda bread?" And that all comes from just personal branding on Twitter, where people had seen it. Images, thoughts, conversations, recipes, little bits of information, live bake-alongs. So I was thinking always about the content that I was putting out there. What is going to get the most engagement? Visuals, absolutely, like Danny said. Images, always high engagement. Videos, second in line. But talking to people, sharing the message. For me, I was very lucky in that because I was very niche and a little bit risque, people like the Manchester Evening News picked up the story. When the Manchester Evening News picks up the story, the Metro picks up the story, the BBC picks up the story, and it just sort of snowballed for me, and my online presence became this whole thing, which is the reason I take up the first 3 pages of Google. And considering I started with 11 followers, which were friends and family who had no bloody idea what Twitter was or how to use it, is quite phenomenal. Now, one of the most important things for me is when I was the Barker Baker, at the peak, I probably had about 1,700 followers on Twitter. It is always quality and not quantity. We have this huge misconception that personal branding, if it is to be successful, means masses. It does not. Masses means nothing if there's no engagement. Relevance is everything. It is that constant conversation. 10,000 people see your Twitter profile and they don't buy what you sell, it makes absolutely no difference. If one person follows you consistently because they care about what you're saying and they care about who you are and what you've got to give, that makes all the difference. So yes, if it's sales, if it's business, if it's values, if it's goals, that's fine. Since I shut down the business, and that was in 2017, we're in 2020, my following has not dipped at all because my messaging has stayed the same. Yes, I'm not selling bread at the Manchester markets anymore. And no, I don't have the bakery, but I am still the Barker Baker because my Twitter and my online persona has always been my values, my goals, and my story, which is what I was saying to you guys in the beginning. That's never changed. My passions are changing the criminal justice system. They are baking beautiful bread. They are challenging people who don't believe in redemption or recovery. And anyone who hits up my social media will see that is true and true and true. So when I say to you guys, don't air your dirty laundry, I've broken that rule. I have. I'm probably one of the few that has done that. And somebody actually said to me a few months ago, does it not scare you that that is always going to be there? That if anybody Googles you for the rest of your life, the first thing that's going to come up is criminal. It doesn't define me. It did for a short period of time, and it was just really good marketing on my part. It was naughty. I knew I had a really saleable product, which was transforming myself in the public eye. And if I could do it, anybody could do it. So I use myself and my social media and my personal branding to be the example. And that is the best thing I could have done. So personal branding, it all comes back to the same thing. Be authentic, be kind, be true to who you are, and just give little bits of information. We don't want you to be boring. We don't want you to be retweets. We don't want generic posts across Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We just want little bits of insight to show who you are, because that is what's going to make you stand out from the crowd. That is what makes you guys special. So it's a bit of soul searching, really. You have to think, what are your values? What are your goals? What is your story? And are you brave enough to put it out there? Because it'll be there forever. So stand by what you say and be proud.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that, Fran. I think like Danny said, you know, the transparency and your honesty is quite inspiring. So thank you very much. I think it might be a nice opportunity for us to kind of have a conversation about some of the points, and maybe if anyone's got any questions. I've got a few points that I would like to bring up, but I'd like to throw it to you guys. If anyone's got any questions that they'd like to ask Fran or Danny on the subject. Yeah, if anyone's got a question, maybe just either come off mute, put your hand up, or you could use a little reaction and we can come to you. A little thumbs up if you've got a question.
I can see that Jennifer's just put in the chat, what do we think about The Social Dilemma on Netflix? Well, honestly, I mean, we could go for days on that one, but terrifying, insightful. It's nothing we don't know. We are big business, we are commodities, we are data, of course we are. Will we ever put down our iPhones, our laptops, our Zoom calls, etc.? No. Can we all be a little bit more sensible about our privacy? Yes, of course. Are we all going to switch our Instagram profiles to private? Probably not, given the topic that we're talking about. But it's about being sensible, being safe. And social media always will be whether you can stand by what you say. Absolutely. So just be careful, unclick the cookies, and look after each other.
Very good. Personally, I haven't actually watched it yet. There's been a big discussion at work about it, and yeah, I think it's fascinating. So it's definitely a must to watch. And from my point of view, I think it's going to be hard to practice a lot of the things that it says. I'm a sucker for kind of being on Twitter or Instagram for most of my day, but I have the defense to be like, oh, I have to for my job, and at least that's what I tell myself. So yeah, I think in terms of like trying to delete Facebook permanently or Instagram and other socials, I will find that difficult. But there's definitely a lot to be said of trying to go off the grid at times and not being as present online as 24/7. Fran, I had a little question for you. So in terms of, I think you did say earlier that you can code and you're coding now. In terms of your kind of personal journey, how much of that and what type of content did you share on social in terms of building up and coming your coder level? I know there's probably a few of us here who are probably going to be embarking on that journey in the coming months. So it'd be interesting to hear kind of what your experience about that was.
So, I mean, I'm 33 and IT for me back in the day consisted of sort of, here's an Excel sheet, populate it, here's a few formulas and build your CV on Word. And that was pretty much the extent of what I was taught in school. And I quickly realized, especially when dipping into social media, which would have been 2012, 2013, when I first started my Twitter profile, I realized I was a dinosaur and that if I wanted to kind of keep up with, I'm not going to say the Kardashians, I'm not doing it, but if I wanted to keep up with the Joneses, there we go, we'll go old school, I had to upskill. And I didn't know how to do that because I already had my degree. It was in politics, which in itself was not particularly relevant. So I am, and which is a strange thing, completely self-taught in all aspects of digital. Now, of course, I have a natural flair for digital marketing because I did it, I proved it, I have an analytical brain, I adore content creation, I'm very linguistic, I love the numbers, so I can pull reports every Monday to Sunday. In terms of coding, YouTube was my savior. Code Academy, code.org, all of these things, textbooks aplenty. I lived, breathed, and ate, drank, sleep, everything from kind of the basics. So we started with beautiful little HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. So no, entirely self-taught. Certainly not a coder by any extent. I know enough to teach very entry-level coding. I'm certainly not Kirsty's level of ingenuity and genius, but I appreciate its beauty. I'm not going to be a software developer. I will always be the creative side, but in 2020, it's impossible to move forward in a digital industry without having a really good finger on the pulse of what's going on. So I think you guys have made totally the right choice. If I'd have known back in the day that Manchester codes were the thing, that's what I would have gone to. I wouldn't have been sat on YouTube for hours on end, that's for sure. I would have had some actual human engagement to tell me if I was doing what was right and etc. So no, you've made a good choice, guys.
I'll pay you later, Fran, for that. I was joking. Not sponsored. You don't get, there's no commission here for Fran for saying that, but thanks, I appreciate that, Fran, for your positive recommendation there. But yeah, I think that's great point that you just raised there, Danny. I think that I'll just pick a quick question from Jonathan Kane, moving the conversation on a little. What are some good questions you can ask yourself to discover your authentic message, authentic online identity? I don't know if you want to take that, Fran.
What makes you happy? What would your mum want to see on your social media? What will make the world a better place? Now, I know that sounds idealistic and a little bit kind of happy clappy, but social media has to be a power for good. Again, if you've seen The Social Dilemma, you will know exactly what I mean when I say that. So in terms of building your authentic brand, what matters to you, what makes you happy, and what can you do to make somebody else's life better? Those are the things that you should be thinking about. It is dog eat dog, and we're all about personal branding to get one over on each other. That is the world that we live in, but it doesn't have to be vicious. We can do it by pulling each other up along the way.
Really good. I think in addition to that, I think I'd also say just think about what your goals are. Like obviously we're going on social media to voice a message, but what is your end game with that? And do you think that this message eventually will come back to bite you? Will it help people? Will it push you forward in the distance? Or is it just literally about, getting your voice out there a little bit more? So if your goal is to, make connections, there's easy ways to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be you create messages. You can just reply to other people's content and you become part of the community that way. If your goal is to become the next vlogger, then, there's a different kind of method for doing that. But yeah, think about your goals and how you can just get yourself to have that level of authenticity and transparency, and be true to yourself as well.
With mine, very much what I wanted was to create a social media persona that was always to reflect other people. I think as a digital marketer, we're often perceived to be extroverts. I'm not. I often call myself the introverted extrovert. It is the industry we've chosen, but my social media, the deep and meaningful message underneath it, and these are the things when I say soul searching, is, are the people out there like me? And that doesn't have to be specific to business. It just is human nature to seek out like minds. So, when I say, who are my people? That's what you need to think about. Who are your people?
Can I just say a point on this? The last cohort, just an example, that one cohort that really stands out that actually implemented some of the points on this session was back in March. And they're all working quite hard currently because they've got final projects that are in this week and next. So none of them are on this call, but it might be worth me connecting you to some of them because they've actually implemented some of these techniques. So I want to show you. Can I share my screen with you all? What I'll do is I'll show you someone that's actually listened to the advice of building an authentic profile and doing really well. So I'll just show you. I usually have many tabs open, so thumbs up if you can see my screen.
Yep, all good.
Yeah, you can't see my bank details, or I don't know, what's in my shopping basket. You can see this Twitter profile. Awesome.
Can't stop recording now.
Antonia is on the March cohort, and she literally started off with like a handful of followers. It was under 100. I was going to invite her on here, but I didn't want to distract her, but instead I'm going to do an interview with her about how she got started and how she managed to grow her following to nearly 2,000 people in less than 6 months, and she gets an incredible amount of engagement. So you just need to look at even her pinned post has nearly 300 people like it. And I think what you can tell straight away, I don't know if Fran and Danny want to kind of pick out anything in particular. There's the use of emojis, and I think emojis have become even more important in the last 12 months to communicate how you're feeling, or it gives words a bit more expression, and she manages to do this really well. She also uses, the two Jens that are in this chat are really good at this as well. Just want to give you two a shout out. You two have started to figure out how to hack how people engage with you, and I see you both growing in that way. But yeah, the hashtags that are used, 100 days of code, women in tech, code newbies, all of these are great hashtags. And a lot of these hashtags, there are a lot of developers that have built bots on the back of some of these hashtags. So if you hashtag something in particular, you might get 5 bots that retweet your post amongst their community of 100,000 followers, and it just amplifies whatever you're trying to say. So yeah, Antonia is quite clear in her bio about what she stands for, what she's interested in. So it's really clear from the get-go of what she's into and what her brand says about her. She also has her GitHub profile there. So if you click into it, it's quite easy to see who she is and what she's about. She's even done a nice README. She's outlined the technologies that she uses, her goals. It's quite obvious that she's streamlined what she wants you to see. And yeah, that'll hopefully increase her following on GitHub, which will ultimately lead back to employers being able to see that this is something she has created from the moment she wanted to start to learn how to code. And she's very committed and dedicated to this craft. And I think that comes through quite well. I don't know if you want to say anything on this, Danny or Fran, but is there anything in particular that you quite like about Antonia's presence?
Relevance all day long, absolutely. So she's followed the exact right protocols in terms of how to build an authentic following, which is doing something she loves, sharing the right hashtags. So she's obviously put some thought behind it, and I think that's critical. And like you say about the emoji thing, it's an interesting sort of evolution in terms of how we use them. I don't know when or how this happened, but once upon a day, emojis were kind of frowned upon in digital, that they were a little bit colloquial and a bit too casual and certainly not professional. But for personal branding, they totally work. They're appropriate, and I think that's exactly the right word. She's got beautiful, creative, appropriate content. So no, I love it. I think this is a really good example.
Yeah, I think it looks fantastic as well. Again, on the emojis, you kind of asked the question earlier, Kirsty, about like how many and when to use. And I think, as Fran was just saying, we're kind of definitely over the last, 15 months, 12 months, we're moving into kind of a bit more very formal setting where social media is very much a place for expressing yourself in pictures and emojis, being informal, but still kind of having a professional level head with it. And looking back at that profile, it was interesting to see that pretty much every single tweet had 4 or 5 comments on it as well. So it sounds like she was also responding to any, tweets that she got. So that level of engagement, I think, is also really important. If your tweet does get any, notifications in terms of whether it's a like or a retweet, just to be able to engage with the people who do reach out to you is so important for creating those conversations and having that authenticity to build those relationships as well.
All right, cool, thank you. And yeah, I just wanted to show you quickly Ursul's profile. So Ursul's one of the tutors that you might come across, if you're in the Manchester Codes community. If you're not, Ursul will mean nothing to you. But here's just another example. He's a CTO of a startup called Just Fulfill. Even though he hasn't got a big online presence, his engagement is quite high, and he has quite a big following on his newsletter. But I think it's really, he doesn't use emojis. So I wanted to show you the contrast of, he's not got his profile full of emojis. He's a quite simple guy. He's he's from Cyprus, really easygoing. He doesn't overdo it with the emojis, but still the same kind of level of direction of what he wants you to see is there. He wants you to go to the newsletter. In this, I think it's quite interesting. I like how he's, given impact of what he's contributed. So this is just one tweet, shows his commitment to whatever he's building. And I think it's quite easy to follow. So yeah, I just wanted to give him another example, but without all of the emojis. So has anybody else got any questions? Let's have a little look. Oh, Scott, that's a big chunky question. I'll leave that to the end. Where are we up to? So, Reza, I hope I've said that right. Reza, you said about being authentic and that this involves some soul searching. Do you have any tips or ways to find ourselves?
Okay, I always find reflective practice is a really good way to go about it. Ask the people that you're friends with, what are your best qualities? What the first 3 words people think of when they think of you, and see if you can relate. Do you agree? Are those the first 3 words? I find self-reflection, I think you can definitely go down the rabbit hole, but it's pretty much harping back to what I said before. What's your purpose? What makes you happy? What's the end goal? And how do you get there? I hate in interviews when somebody says to me, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I think, honestly, what a ridiculous question. None of us know the answer to that. I am happy today. I'll be happy tomorrow. Anything ahead of that, I am pretty much planning, hoping, and working towards.
Not too much to add, but I think for me, at Buffer, we have a very kind of inclusive culture of, bringing your whole self to work. Everyone's very open. And what I would say is if you're in a working environment and instead of trying to maybe build a personal brand to get to a level of a job, if you're going into that job and you're changing yourself dramatically to try and get that role, is it going to be the right role for you? If you're trying to project yourself as something that you're not online, is that something that's going to make you happy in the long term? So I think I'll try and bring it back to that a little bit. If I'm saying things on an online presence that I wouldn't say to my friends, wouldn't say to my family, it's probably not going to be the right thing for me to be able to be sustainable with, and that's not going to be the right company that I want to have a happy career with or something like that in the long term as well.
I think be realistic as well. I think living in a world of social media and digital where we're consumed 24/7 by people watching and thinking, oh God, we're in the same class at school and look what she's doing and look what car they're driving, honestly doesn't matter. Do what makes you happy. Again, it all sounds very wishy-washy, guys. And honestly, I'm not a cuddly, warm, I'm not a Care Bear, but that is the most important thing. I love my job. And actually, you guys will see, I posted on Twitter a few days ago, I love my job. Being on furlough has been the hardest part for me. So the only reason I'm happy in my job is because I'm authentic and because I love what I do. I appreciate any of my students, any of my colleagues can hop on my social media at any point, at any time. And as a teacher in apprenticeships, that's terrifying because they have huge insight into who I am. My social media serves a purpose, which is to inspire them to do better, to do more, to be better. And I'm never ashamed of it. And I think that is absolutely critical. Be proud of your social media, because if you're not, you're doing something wrong.
Cool. Can I just jump in and show you? So there's a girl on a previous cohort that I think finished maybe 8 months ago. She managed to get a job through Twitter. So she literally, she's a great example of how the results of the hard work now can pay off in time. So I'll just show you her profile because it's not that much different from the others. And I wanted to counteract what you both just said. Sometimes I find that people that say they're going to be something is quite inspiring. So not being stuck in, right now I'm currently a nurse and I want to get into tech. Sometimes having that in your bio is quite interesting. People want to hear that personal story. So sometimes it might be like, someone did it really well, like a former lawyer, aspiring junior developer, and being really clear that that's who you are and that's where you're going and you're going to get there. So Jasmine is the girl that I want to show you. He did this really well. So this is Jasmine. She graduated, she then got offered a job, and then the job fell through. She was about to start and this company went into liquidation. Like, it's this crazy story. But then she put the story of what happened to her on Twitter. She was just like, I finished a boot camp, I've just got offered a job, and I've just rejected, cancelled my contract. Can people retweet that I'm looking for work? And I retweeted her post, and someone at Foot Asylum picked it up. He was a manager that was looking for a web dev, someone to help them on the front end for Foot Asylum. And they didn't even advertise the role externally. They just saw Jasmine and they went through her Twitter. Like, the guy just literally said, I didn't know anything about Jasmine. We went through her Twitter account. We liked what we saw on the first, couple of scrolls, and then invited her into an interview. She skipped the first stage because of how strong her Twitter profile was. And she even has a portfolio. So if you click through, I'm sure she won't mind me sharing it with you all. But, there's a portfolio there. It's quite easy. So you go to Twitter, you go straight to a portfolio. She's showing you who she is. She's 25. She's from the north of England. These are some of her projects that she's worked on. Really clear. And I think that's a really good example of how you can leverage, your Twitter and get the result that you want. So yeah, I'll move on. I'm conscious of time. So Jen, I hope some of the bits that we've talked about answers your question. Which platforms should we use to build a brand as a developer? I think what I'd like to do after this is invite some devs that have been in the industry for a while to kind of get you to see what they use, because I think at different stages there's different platforms. So as a newbie, you might want to concentrate on CodePen, on GitHub. You might want to build your own profile and portfolio. But when you're actually in the industry, that might change to something else. But it might be worth me introducing you to some people that have used a number of different platforms. David Arrowsmith, good question. Do you find it difficult to make time to maintain your various social media presences? I think, Danny, do you want to take that?
I would say that it definitely could be, but realistically, that is what the point of having like a tool like a Buffer or Hootsuite or something is, to manage all those various spots in one go, basically. That way you would be dramatically reducing the amount of time you are spending on your social media. Most of those tools will allow you to see what engagements you have. So whether it's replies coming into your posts, or even just checking retweets, likes, comments, shares, etc. And having a general overview of everything in one spot will allow you to dramatically reduce the time you're spending individually on each social network, and where you can focus on kind of how to respond and engage with the community that you're trying to build as well. So yeah, look into a tool that would best fit your needs.
I'd like to just say it is hard to maintain so many profiles. Do you not think that maybe, Fran, you've had experience of just, concentrate on one, do it really well? Because like, I'm terrible, but I know that I've spent all my energy on my Twitter profile over the years, and I've neglected Instagram, I've neglected everything else, but I do one thing and I try and do that one thing well.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, yeah, definitely. For me, I use my Instagram primarily, my Facebook just for sort of updates, it's more personal, and my Twitter most definitely is sort of my bandwagon. I only use LinkedIn for work purposes. It's not really my go-to, or to share and engage with people, again, my people, of relevant stories, and to just sort of draw attention to bigger issues and things that I see there. But yeah, I make time every day. However, having listened to Danny, I can see the benefits of maybe hopping on a bit of a scheduling software concept, because it is slightly arduous, but also it's such a negative thing to have to spend part of your day doing. I think it's all consuming. And as a digital marketer by day, to be that as well in my personal life is, there's no time to switch off. So yes, everything in moderation, guys. You will see if you watch The Social Dilemma.
Okay, thanks. And Scott has a really, really, really good point here. And actually, I do get asked this quite a lot. I don't really know the best answer to this, but I'm going to give you my best bit of advice from like the experience of people doing it previously. So being in a different industry at the moment, as many others are, I need to be careful not to make it too clear that I'm transitioning into the coding. I think there's a few people in this situation. Especially as I'm a recruiter and all my colleagues are all over LinkedIn. Do you have any recommendations of the kind of content we should share that would look good for potential employers, but not necessarily flag up that to our current employers that we're looking for a new job, right? So what I would say on this basis is, it's a tough one, but what you could do to get around it is, if you look at Jasmine's profile, it's like Jasmine Codes, at Jasmine Codes. Maybe what you might want to do is create a new profile, and it's Scott Codes, right? And instead you don't actually put your photograph, you put like an avatar of something that looks like you, and possibly build up a following and a profile based on this avatar that is not you. And then when the time comes, you've built up enough traction, you can flip out your profile photograph and make it known that that is you later down the line. When it comes to LinkedIn, you're just going to have to be really careful, because I don't know how you can get around that without looking like you're a catfish, and building finding someone on Google, getting a photograph. It's a lot of effort, and actually I don't know at what point does it become fraudulent. So I'm just giving you my honest opinion on this. I do think there's an element of, on Twitter, you can get away with building a dummy profile and then switching it out to be more reflective of you down the line. I hope that's helpful.
I wonder if it might be as simple as just saying, I'm looking into coding as a hobby, I want to have my side hustle, build something up kind of along those paths, and you can go into, if it is LinkedIn, you can share the projects that you're working on and don't have it to be necessarily in a work capacity. You can just be like, this is a passion that I'm really, I love doing outside of work. And then that way you can showcase what you have been working on, how you're growing, how you're building. And then further down the line, if anything comes of that, so be it. It's not necessarily something that work should be threatened by initially.
That's true. I just think sometimes there are extreme cases where if their employer found out, it might question your commitment to the company. So I get that there's obviously varying levels of how much you can share, but that's a really good point, Danny. People do often say it's a hobby and then transition out. So yeah, the next question, oh, Robin's kind of just asked the same. Is it wise to make new social media accounts for marketing yourself, or should you adapt your current profiles? Good question. I think that kind of goes back to a little bit on Fran's point about the audit. Maybe you should make sure that you've cleaned everything that you don't want employers to see, to save you some time potentially. But yeah, I think it depends if you've got something to hide, you know, if there's something you don't want them to see, if there's nothing that you need to hide or cover up, then I don't think you need to worry too much about that. Unless you're doing some 360, you know, you really want to transform the way that you presented yourself previously to how you want to be now. Any other questions? Let's have a look. Joelle could be upskilling thing on. All right, I don't think we've got any more questions, but if you do, now is the time to shoot over anything. If anyone's got anything else. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. I think that's everything. If you've got anything else, any other questions, we can shoot them over to the panelists. But yeah, thank you so much. I hope that was insightful. I hope you've learned something along the way. I certainly did on the update in the LinkedIn bio. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I hope it was helpful. And yeah, if you want to put anything about the event, please use the hashtag #UnlockYourBrand. And yeah, amazing. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to our lovely Danny and Fran for hosting us tonight. See you later. Have a good night.
Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.